Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, we'll be talking about this very unfortunate incident that happened yesterday in Karachi, at the Karachi Stock Exchange, where 4 terrorists tried to enter the stock exchange with some very dubious intentions. But interestingly, the brave and the gallant security, in fact, straight away went after them. 2 of our security guards, including 1 police officer, a sub-inspector and a security guard, they were martyred, and 1 civilian was also killed. Whereas all the 4 terrorists were eliminated within a span of 8 minutes. Not even rangers had reached by that time, neither the police. But the brave Pakistani security guards, they just went after them without even thinking twice about their own lives, and eventually saved Pakistan, Karachi and the Karachi Stock Exchange from a big mishap. Now, on this particular instance, as we did a show yesterday, also we'll continue to update you on this particular story. But let's see what the Prime Minister had tweeted today. Let me read it out for you. Prime Minister says it has the first SOT, the soundbite of the Prime Minister.
हमारी सिक्योरिटी फोर्सेस ने मुकाबला करके एक बहुत बड़ा सानिया जो कि बड़ी प्लानिंग से हमारा हमसाया मुल्क हिंदुस्तान पाकिस्तान को डिस्टेबलाइज करने के लिए उन्होंने बड़ा प्लान बनाया हुआ था। ये बहुत ज़्यादा असला लेके आए थे। इनका सिर्फ एक एम था कि स्टॉक एक्सचेंज के अंदर जाके और वहाँ उनको हॉस्टेज रखते, और जो एक दफ़ा मुंबई में बहुत बड़ी दहशतगर्दी हुई थी, बिल्कुल उसी तरह का प्लान था कि स्टॉक एक्सचेंज में भी ये वही करते हैं। हमें कभी कोई शक नहीं कि ये हिंदुस्तान से हुआ है।
Well, the Prime Minister is very confident, and he said that we have no doubt that Indian agencies and India itself is involved in this particular incident. And he said this was something similar what happened in Mumbai. They wanted to take hostages, and then they wanted to renegotiate or negotiate about certain things. But our law enforcement agencies did not allow that to happen. So we have with us to talk about this very interesting incident, Ahmed Qureshi on the Skype with us. Ahmed Qureshi Saab, thank you very much for taking out your time and talking to us. We will also be talking to Shahzad Chaudhry Saab, who is a senior analyst, and we'll be talking to Khurram Iqbal as well. But Ahmed Qureshi, first of all, welcome to our show, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to
Ahmed,
be with you, Faisal.
Good to hear from you. Ahmed, first of all, your take on this particular incident. Now, normally, whenever such incidents used to happen in Pakistan, we would hear that the TTP has claimed the responsibility, or Daesh has taken the responsibility for that incident. But this time again, I mean, it has been happening before also. Once in 2018, the attack on the Chinese consulate, and then now trying to attack the Karachi Stock Exchange, or the PSX, Pakistan Stock Exchange for that matter, which was immediately taken care of, and all the 4 terrorists of BLA were immediately killed. Now, the BLA, it seems that the overall position of the Indians is getting really weakened in Afghanistan, especially at TTP. Now they are using the other proxies via BLA inside Balochistan. And I'm sure, Ahmed, you study about them, whether it's Bramdad Bukti or Harbiar Murray or Mehran Baloch or Al Nazar for that matter. So these characters now, where do they stand, and what exactly is happening out there?
Right, Faisal. This is a very interesting subject. The BLA, of course, was a project started by the Indian intelligence and the KGB, the intelligence agency of the now defunct Soviet Union. And they began this project in the 1970s, 60s and 70s, and they recruited many young Pakistanis, and specifically young Pakistani Baloch, and they took them to the Soviet Union, and they taught them at universities and recruited them, and then sent them back to wage an insurgency. But this insurgency, Faisal, died out after the end of the Cold War, around about 1991-92. But the BLA resurfaced. It was dead. It resurfaced around 2004 and 2005. After the international coalition, of course, entered Afghanistan and removed the Taliban government. After that, we saw the re-emergence of the BLA and the re-emergence of all these characters whose names you just mentioned. Why the BLA re-emerged? It's because India got a space to operate in Afghanistan. But let's be very clear about one thing. Despite the fact that this BLA is launching specifically over the last 1 year and a half, some very spectacular attacks. And I'll come to that if there's time. But despite that, we have to understand one thing. This terrorist organization and whoever is backing it, and mainly it's being backed by India. It has some other allies in the region, but mainly this is an Indian project. Despite all of that support, this BLA is on the defeat. It has been almost wiped out inside Pakistan. It has now some presence across the border from Pakistan, but not inside Pakistan. The names that you just mentioned, the United States added the name of the BLA to its list of terror organizations. Switzerland has refused and declined to give asylum to one of the BLA leaders. Britain has moved and restricted the fundraising activity of some of the names and some of the people who were supposedly the leaders of this organization in the UK. Unfortunately, some of these activists of this organization, I wouldn't call them activists, these are abettors in terrorism because they advocate violence. Yes, and they unfortunately, some of them have asylum in Europe. They have used the liberal immigration policies of Europe, which are based on humanitarian grounds, and they have found loopholes, and they're based in Europe. But the good thing is that many European countries, and I just named the UK and I named Switzerland, they have restricted the activities of these people. In fact, one of the names that you just mentioned was denied entrance despite having a Swiss visa, entry visa for, I don't know, 2 years or 5 years. He was sent back from a Swiss airport back to London because the Swiss government thought that these people are actually affiliated with the BLA and this is a terror organization. So basically, BLA is on a back foot.
On a run primarily. Now,
100%, 100%.
Ahmed, I'm sure you must have encountered all these individuals in Geneva during the sessions of the Human Rights Commission out there. Whether it's Bramdad Bukti, Harbiar Murray, I've also seen and met Mehran Baloch, Dr. Al-Nazar, and so many other characters, and you will see them sitting with the Indian agents of RAW, and those are the ones who are financing them, and these characters are staying and taking the whole floors of Holiday Inn out there. My point is, now since this organization has been declared as a terrorist organization, BLA, so don't you think that the international law applies on them, especially they've been declared terrorists by the Americans? Now, what is the current, as you mentioned that the visa was denied, but I've also heard that India is ready to support them, India is giving them the nationality and so on and so forth. Now, do you think their activities would be under some sort of a check from that particular day onwards since they were declared the terrorists, or you still believe that they are roaming around freely and are involved in all sorts of notorious activities which the European Union doesn't allow?
Bad news for our Indian friends, Faisal, because all this investment in all these names that you just listed, they are restricted. They don't have a freedom of movement. They're no longer able to raise funds, advocate, and do the things that they used to do before. In fact, they've become an embarrassment for the Indian government. After the Swiss government denied asylum to one of the people that you just mentioned, that gentleman asked and appealed to the Indian government and to Prime Minister Narendra Modi to give him nationality or at least asylum in India. And India, until now, and this I think it's been 2 years now for this request, and it was a very public request. I mean, the request was made through diplomatic channels and also through social media by a couple of the people that you mentioned. And despite all of that, the Indian government is unable to give them asylum. Why? Because it knows that there is so much evidence that Pakistan has shared. Pakistan has shared, by the way, and I've spoken to people in our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Our government has shared. The reason the United States last year, let me remind you, in May last year, in 2019, under the Trump administration, BLA was added to the list of terror organizations for the very first time, despite the fact that BLA has been around for more than almost 30 years now. But for 30 years, it did not get into that list. but it happened in May last year in 2019. Why? Because Pakistan shared with the US government very damning information and evidence that shows that this organization is involved in terrorism. In fact, many of our friends internationally came to know about meetings between Indian diplomats and members of the Indian consulates in Afghanistan with some of these people when they were based in Afghanistan. The good news is even Afghanistan has now restricted the activities of these people. They can't move much even in Afghanistan, although, of course, as you know, and as all of us know, Afghanistan has all these areas which are out of government control. But let's give credit where it's due. The Afghan government has cooperated with Pakistan on BLA. Same goes for the Iranian government. The Iranian government has been working very closely with the Pakistani government, and Pakistani government has pinpointed the activities. As you know, the border region between Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, this is a no man's land. And some of these terrorists and militants move across. So all of these governments have been working together. These people are on the run, but they do have the capability. They have sleeper cells. I'm sure you know the story of this Indian naval commander, Kulbhushan Yadav,
Yes.
who was based in Chabahar. He was caught inside Pakistan, and he has sleeper cells. And as you know, in intelligence trade, in the intelligence craft, sleeper cells remain underground for many, many years sometimes, and they're activated to do exactly this kind of activity that we've seen, this kind of terror act that we've seen in Karachi. The good thing is also, Faisal, keep in mind that you saw the performance of these four men, these four terrorists, who were planning actually to have what the Prime Minister said, a Mumbai attack style attack here, maybe hole up inside for 3 or 4 days. But they were taken out, Faisal, in the first 8 minutes, which shows you that their training is really not that good. Although they have support, they have maybe weapons or something hidden from, because there are sleeper cells, but they're not really that well trained, or maybe there's a huge gap between the time they received the training and between the time they were activated.
Absolutely, because when you talk about the Taliban or the Daesh, those are the characters. They are battle hardened. At the same time, they're professional also, whether we admit it or we don't. They are the masters in guerrilla tactics and guerrilla warfare. Whereas these characters seem like some youngsters who were just sent on a suicidal mission, and they completed it very interestingly because all of them died without even entering the stock exchange. Now, Ahmed, you stay with us, and we've been also joined in by Khurram Shahzad, another known international affairs expert. Khurram Saab, Assalamu Alaikum, and welcome to the show.
Ji, walaikum assalam, and thank you very much.
Khurram, I'm sure you must have been following this story. It was all over the newspapers as well as on the television screens for the last almost 24, 25 hours. But having said that now, it seems that the soft targets would be the most vulnerable ones, because this is where these cowards would attack, because they do not have the guts to even enter the stock exchange. They do not even have the capability and the ability as well. Now, the current situation tells us one thing very clearly, that the Indians are sort of getting very impatient. Nothing is working for them in Afghanistan to destabilize Pakistan, whether it's Iran issue or whatever the problem seems to be. The Indians, they plan to do a lot in Karachi, in Balochistan, in Gilgit-Baltistan, or in KP for that matter. Even Punjab you can't rule out. My point is, sir, that if this continues, if this is the course of actions by the Indians, and at the same time, I was watching the Indian channels, and they are blaming Pakistan that a certain number of terrorists of Pakistani origin, they have entered the Indian territory via Nepal. So one thing we should always keep in mind, that if something happens in India in the coming days, which we are afraid they'll do it themselves and they'll blame Pakistan for that, just to go for a false flag operation. Do you see any reality in this statement, sir?
Well, India has a long history of conducting false flag operations and then blaming them on Pakistan. But gradually, such Indian allegations, they are losing international appeal, because as the time goes by, India is being exposed on its support for terrorism inside Pakistan. What we have seen recently, that there was a time when terrorism in Pakistan was driven ideologically, but now this is the time when the proxyism overshadows the ideology, Now we are seeing the revival of proxyism, the Cold War proxyism inside Pakistan. So in Balochistan province, the support for these groups has increased manifolds. But despite that support, we have seen that their ability to conduct attack on hard targets has diminished totally. And that is mainly because of the reason, as Ahmed has rightly outlined, that they are on the run. Whether they're physical training centers inside Afghanistan, whether they're safe sanctuaries inside Iran, it is the result and outcome of conscious diplomatic efforts by the Pakistani government that have continued to squeeze BLA and its allied organizations. So what we are seeing at the moment now in Pakistan, that the capacity of Pakistan law enforcement agencies and armed forces has increased manifold, thanks to years of experience in the battlefield that they have acquired fighting lethal and terrorist organizations like Daesh, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, and BLA. On the other hand, the capacity of terrorist organizations, whether it's BLA or TTP, has greatly diminished. Now what we need to do to be heard internationally and to be taken more seriously, it's basically to project this narrative with full force, the way Prime Minister has exactly done yesterday. In the previous government, Faisal will have to admit that the previous government of Pakistan Muslim League N was reluctant to highlight the involvement of Indian intelligence agencies in fomenting terrorism in Pakistan.
The only thing which we used to hear at that time was the external hand. The Urdu word is Beruni Haath. Prime Minister today was very categorical, very clear that India's involvement. Yes.
Exactly. What we saw in the previous regime, that Kulbhushan was arrested under the PMLN regime, but the PMLN leaders, they were reluctant. Even there was a meeting of United Nations General Assembly. There was a great opportunity.
This issue wasn't even discussed.
It wasn't even discussed. So now this is a PTI government. It has gone an extra mile in exposing Indian involvement in terrorism in Pakistan, and this is what our diplomatic offices, our media must be doing, so that our case internationally is further strengthened, so the space for BLA is further squeezed, and we are able to completely dismantle these terrorist organizations.
All right, thank you very much, Khurram, for your comments. Now we've also been joined in by Air Vice Marshal Saab, and we'll be talking to him. We'll be talking to him about two very important areas, and that is about the ongoing tension between the Chinese and the Indians, and between Pakistan and India at the same time. A lot of analysts in India do believe that Pakistan could take advantage of the current situation and do something in Kashmir. This is what the Indian version is. First of all, thank you very much, Air Vice Marshal Shehzad Chaudhry Saab, for taking out your time and being a part of the show. And let's start off from this particular point. But sir, before you start, we will make you hear a very interesting statement of Arnab Goswami, one of the most controversial anchors of India. Let's see what this character has to say.
Suddenness, the sheer suddenness of the move, the unexpected nature of the move, the unpredictability of the move, the fact that there was no warning to the Chinese. They don't know what hit them. Now the Chinese will know. Now the Chinese will know that when we want to act, we shall act as we wish without warning. That we shall move in stealth and attack when necessary. Reason number 3, and this is Naya Bharat viewers, the new India.
Now, this is Arnab Goswami. Sorry. Now, Shehzad Saab, he says, well, when the Indian soldiers are killed, we will ban their applications. Wow, what a combo. I want your take on this particular joke from Goswami.
I'm grateful to you for adding a bit of humor to this program, because it's getting a bit too serious for all of us. So that's nice. But at the same time, I'm extremely sorry to see Arnab Goswami reduced to this level. He's been a bad example, unfortunately, on the media for a long time. But for him to get to the point where he's looking for stealthy motives and how what kind of surgical strikes might India actually undertake from here on, it's redeeming in the sense that at least they will not make claims of crossing borders. Now they can do that sitting in their homes and make sure that they can just cancel applications made in China or by China or whatever.
Or
But anyway,
boycott their products, for that matter.
yeah, that is beside the point. Remember, I mean, in $100 billion trade, when most of what India produces is for that the raw material is actually received from China, and that is what they import, and especially their drugs industry is really dependent on the imports from China. So they'll have to make a quick adjustment in trying to find alternate sources for about $100, at least 75 to $80 worth of imports. And it's not easy to do in the next, with the applications going off as they have done. But let's see, where do they take it and how far can they take it? So that aside, the sad aspect is that India, unfortunately, has put itself in a bind. They have opened up at least, I would say, 6 fronts, if not 3 or 4. And I'll tell you how many. For example, Nepal is one on the external side. Kashmir already has been a festering wound for them. And this fact that Kashmiris are fighting their battle for liberty and freedom fight, that goes on the LOC with Pakistan, and Pakistan has exercised extreme restraint at a point of time when they were at the weakest, when the Chinese exposed them on the Ladakh border. And along with that, of course, what they come across or see the Chinese in the way that they've got their objectives without even firing a shot. Now, that's the kind of India that Narendra Modi is looking at. So unfortunately, they fall back to what they are used to. It's a very stealthy way of doing things, using proxies to attack Pakistan through Kandahar, through Iran, using people like Kulbhushan Yadav, not with the capacity or the ability of a force that they assume would possibly be counted amongst the leading powers of Asia or South Asia, if not Asia. So what I'm saying is that India, unfortunately, has been exposed very badly. Its vulnerabilities are wide open. Internally, the Muslims are being currently kept quiet because of the COVID. But come the time when COVID is, sort of just abates a little bit, you'll see their reaction to Muslims and how the Muslims within India establish their own position and voice. And I think those are the challenges that Narendra Modi and India has. A statesman would have acted very differently. At this moment, it's not in the hand of the statesman. It is in the hands of Ajit Doval and Amit Shah kind of characters, and who surely nowhere close to being called statesmen at all.
All right. Now, AVM Saab, some more entertainment for you. Mehbooba Mufti, the daughter of Mufti Saab, the president of Jammu Kashmir People's Democratic Party. Now, what she says in a tweet, she says that President JKPDP detained on the 5th of August 2019. Since then, this account is being operated by me, IL Tija, Miss Mufti's daughter. And then there is another one from Mehbooba Mufti, and it says Chinese troops will finally leave Galwan Valley since they won't be able to TikTok anymore. Kya ghar mein ghus ke mara? And then there is another tweet of Rana Ayub. Rana Ayub, she says that India gives a fitting response to China, bans TikTok. So the interesting part is this is what the Indians can do. But very interestingly, AVM Saab, now since you have mentioned about something very important about the region, the parliament very categorically approved that this is the exact demarcation of Nepal. The issue, in fact, rose with the Indians. When it comes to Pakistan, they have a border conflict. When it comes to China, they have a border conflict. When it comes to Bangladesh, they have got issues on the border as well. You talk about Bhutan. They've been bullying Bhutan for such a long time, but I think sanity would prevail there as well. You talk about Maldives, and we understand the kind of influence the Indians have out there. You talk about Sri Lanka. We all know what's been going on out there, who was financing the Tamils and were creating problems for the Lankans as well. Now, this particular country is a terrorist country exporting terrorism all over the region. I mean, how to counter this, sir? How to go after this? I mean, forget about the size and the power of the Indians. We understand the ability to how to handle those characters and the way the Chinese did it without even firing a single bullet. Now, the Indian army has been exposed.
Faisal, unfortunately, unless you have the moral authority. Now, it's very key. You don't really need political authority. You don't only need a strong economy. What you also need to establish yourself as a leader of any kind is also a moral authority. This country, the India, has lost its moral authority. When you treat with your people the way that you treated the Kashmiris, the way you treated the Muslims in India, the way you treated minorities of India, when you treat them like this, and when you treat your smaller neighbors with disrespect, and I'm talking of Bhutan, I'm talking of how Sikkim was taken in and absorbed and annexed by the Indians, and I'm talking of Nepal. Pakistan can stand its own feet by the grace of Almighty. So what I'm saying is that when you get that kind of a disrespect, and you're disrespected by your smaller neighbors, and you are faced off by countries which are smaller than you, then obviously you've lost your moral authority. There's something wrong with the system of nationhood that you have in which you exist. So I think the Indian idea, if there was an idea, has been actually lost for a long time now. And more that the people like Narendra Modi and his team and the RSS agenda continue to sort of stay on. And the longer that they stay, I think the moral authority that should have been there is being dissolved with every passing day. And that is what makes the nations around it, their smaller neighbors, much stronger. They look much better. They look much stronger. They're more confident about themselves, and therefore they can face off a bully. This is a case of a bully trying to bully smaller people, and smaller people or smaller nations standing up to a bully and telling them that you will not be able to bully us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Ahmed Qureshi, there was this statement by the Indians yesterday, and they said that, well, we have gathered some intelligence info that a certain number, they did not disclose the exact number, that there a certain number of people from the Pakistani origin, this is what they said, have entered via the Nepalese border. And I fail to understand that if there is so much of tension going on, how can they enter, number one. Secondly, let's suppose if they have entered, they said that three places could be the target. He said one could be Bihar, because there is a lot going on out there in that region. A lot of hue and cry against the central government. Then said could be the Indian occupied Kashmir, or the third city they mentioned was about New Delhi. So do you see something which we earlier witnessed in 2001, like an attack on the Indian parliament, totally managed by the Indian agencies, or something of that sort, which happened in Mumbai, unfortunately, in which civilians were killed, and they blamed Pakistan for that, made documentaries, made movies, and tried to malign Pakistan at every level. Do you see something of that sort happening inside India?
Right, Faisal, we have to say this very openly, and I think lots of people in Pakistan are saying this, but we have to really make it stick worldwide, which is the fact that India is the master of proxy warfare in this region. Unfortunately, for all the wrong reasons, Pakistan and we, somehow this description stuck to us, and the Indians kept repeating it for many, many years. And somehow they convinced many people in many think tanks and in the media and possibly in many governments worldwide that somehow Pakistanis and Pakistan is the master of proxy warfare and the initiator of proxy warfare in the region. But the fact is, a lot of people worldwide do not know this, that India is the first country in this region, in South Asia, that introduced proxy warfare. And this started as early as 1950s. When we did not have Lashkar-e-Taiba, when we didn't even have ISI at that time. And we saw how the soil of Afghanistan at that time started being used by the Indians against Pakistan to promote independent Pashtunistan and independent Balochistan. And there's a long history during the 50s and the 60s and the 70s with the creation of the BLA with the KGB and so forth. So, and now when you come now, we have the story, the 10-year-old story of Samjhauta Express, or the Friendship Express, the train that both Pakistan and India started as a symbol of friendship between these two peoples who need that friendship, who need peace. And unfortunately, there was a huge terror attack. More than 60 people died. Majority of them were Pakistanis, ordinary people who were in India to meet their families. And Pakistan was blamed, and ISI was blamed for that. But later on, thanks to India's own investigations, it turned out that it was Indian actors within the Indian military and the Indian extremist organizations that were involved. And this is a very clear-cut case of Indian proxy warfare mastery and how they use it really to turn tables in Pakistan. I also recall about 7 years ago, there were huge riots in several Indian cities where Indian citizens came out on the streets, and there were videos, of course, made where these Indian citizens were beating up poor migrants from northeastern Indian states. And these attacks actually took the shape of racist attacks. And at that time, the Indian government blamed Pakistan and said and claimed that Facebook posts uploaded in Pakistan were the reason for these riots in Indian cities, which was, of course, ridiculous, and nobody bought it internationally. And at that time, the Indian government said and publicized the pictures of 4 Pakistanis and said that these are Lashkar-e-Taiba militants who entered Mumbai and could do something. You remember that? And it turned out the 4 were actually simple salesmen who were working in one of the telecom centers in Lahore, one of the telecom markets in Lahore, and ordinary people. Everybody knows them, and they've been working there for years. And the Indian Interior Ministry, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, publicized those pictures and had to then take the story back. So there are many examples where India makes these kind of claims that you just referred to, where Pakistanis coming from, infiltrating from Nepal and so forth. There's a huge record in history of Indian proxy warfare. There's a huge history of false claims by India. And of course, we have the biggest story, which is the Kulbashan Yadov network, obviously, and what they've been doing. And so there's tremendous material. And I have to say this, Faisal, and I think we need to be a little self-critical as well. I mean, with this wealth of information and wealth of circumstantial evidence that we have, I think previous Pakistani governments were not successful in putting forth a very solid case, and we can. And I'm very glad that finally Pakistan and the Pakistani government now is beginning to do that, and we're seeing some signs of that. But also, let me also give credit to a couple of previous governments. And I remember there was a summit meeting between the Pakistani Prime Minister and the Indian Prime Minister, both former, at Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. And at that time also, I think the Pakistani Prime Minister,
Yusuf Raza Gilani was there.
Yes, he did actually share some information with the
then Indian Ahmed, do you remember what happened to Manmohan Singh when he returned back to India? Right after that?
Exactly. So we have tremendous evidence that India is the master of proxy warfare in South Asia, number one. It's the first country that introduced nuclear weapons here. It's the first country that messed up this whole region. And it is the larger country that should and can show magnanimity and open-hearted. It does have the political capital to take all these smaller countries around it along, but it is not. And it pushes smaller countries like Pakistan against the wall and forces us to take up options that we do not want to take, because we also want to live in peace.
All right.
I think we have a solid case against India.
All right. Now, Air Vice Marshal Shahzad Saab, couple of questions for you here, sir. Number one, when we look at the current situation in Ladakh, sir, it is believed that a certain area has been captured by the Chinese and they will not go away. Whereas India is beefing up their securities, you can hear their Su-30s thundering in the air in that particular region. The airbase close to Daulat Beg, I mean, they have been constantly sending their sorties of C-130s and other planes, because that is the main supply base for the Siachen and other places as well. Now, my point is, sir, that since they are beefing up their security, they are increasing the number of troops. They have also deployed Akash missiles there, serves to air missiles, as well as now we have also learned that by the end of July, they'll be able to have 6 of the Rafales, plus their indigenous Tejas, so on and so forth, upgradation of so many other planes. And then they're talking about acquiring the better version of Su-30s, MKIs, as well as MiG-29s. Now, my point is, sir, and then the American cooperation, whether in the form of giving them the better and highly sophisticated manless planes which we call the UVs, or for that matter, the technology, plus on top the Israeli aid. Now, this seems to be telling us a story that new alignments are being formed, even in the regional level as well as at the international level. Your take, sir, and where do we need to place ourselves? Do we need to play neutral currently, sir, or do we need to be totally in alignment with the Chinese?
So let's go back to what we were discussing earlier, that India has this capacity and ability to create a false flag situation, and in
So,
that false flag then find a reason to take it on Pakistan and pin it on Pakistan. Now that was a possibility, and there's been a possibility we've been talking of. But something has held them back. Something has told them this is not the time, this is not the time, and therefore they resort to what they did recently or yesterday in terms of something happening in Karachi stock exchange. And somebody said it's the BLA, Balochistan Liberation Army. The question is, what is Balochistan Liberation Army, if they are at all any credibility attached to them in terms of fighting for the rights of Balochistan? One, what are they doing using terror techniques? What are they doing using terror methods? And what are they doing trying to do something for Balochistan in the stock exchange in Karachi? So whose agenda are they following? So we know whose agenda are they following. And why has the
absolutely.
nation fallen to that level? And why has the nation fallen to that level? Why has India fallen back to its terrorist ways? Simply because of the fact that India today is incapable of doing any other thing beyond the proxy terror methods that it has used for a long time in Afghanistan or from Afghanistan and sometime from Iran. So we must understand the status. We must understand the state of India currently in terms of its capacity. So no Rafale, no SA-8s, no number of C-130J sorties to Daulat Beg Oldie, any number of sorties or any number of flights will be able to get the Chinese out of the 40 or 50 or 80 kilometers that the Chinese have acquired without firing a shot. Unfortunately, flying the aeroplanes over the Chinese heads or around that area, and I'm sure they're not flying in Galwan Valley, I can tell you that. They're keeping a very safe distance, And so with all that, when the Chinese continue to retain or stay there, these flights are just flights. They're just trying to bolster their own self-assurance, really. So India has lost a battle. India has lost its prestige. India has lost its name in the eyes of its own people and its own eyes. And so therefore, it must resort to something as dirty as a proxy tactic using terror against Pakistan. So that is the nature of what India can do. What may Pakistan do? Pakistan should know the level to which India has fallen, be ready to fight that war once again. We must understand that we need to be careful, cautious, and be aware of the fact that our borders with southern Afghanistan and Iran continue to be vulnerable, and therefore we need to make sure that we mount good defenses there. We must make sure that our internal security is up to the mark as it was yesterday, and therefore it must stay so for a long time, because India has fallen to that level where India will actually will impose a war on you in terms of the way it has been doing for the last 10, 15 years now. And
And
that kind of
if you, sir,
war,
what about the
Pakistan has to probably
alignments?
start again.
What about the alignments? The
Well,
new
the alignment
alignments.
is quite clear. I mean, we don't have to, look, the Israelis or the Americans or C-130J pilots from the USAF are not going to, in 1962, it was very interesting. When Nehru wrote to President Roosevelt, I believe it was in, no, Eisenhower probably at that time. So
Eisenhower, yeah.
1962, it wrote to Eisenhower and said, we need support. We need help. Or maybe it was Truman. Maybe we need support and help, but we will need American pilots to come and fly your aeroplanes for us. That is the kind of thing that they all asked for in 1962. Today is not 1962. And the American pilots are not going to come and fight for them. And neither will the Israelis come and fight
But
for them.
Evim
So
Saab, when we
whatever
hear that the Americans, they have a lot of presence in the supporting countries like Philippines, South Korea, Japan, Vietnam for that matter. And at the same time, we've also learned that, and you're an ex-Air Force senior officer, you know what exactly one aircraft carrier means. Forget about the number of jets there or the number of people working. I mean, it has a submarine, it has destroyers. I mean, there's a huge...
who has ever fought a war without a quid pro quo for anyone else? Do you realize in the Arab Gulf War, for example, the Americans made the Arabs pay $36 billion for the war that had fought against
the expense amount, basically.
In the Second World War, when the Americans were forced to go into the Second World War in support of the Allies. The deal was very simple. UK will not no more be the colonizing power. They will stop. They will release all their colonies, and the Americans will repress them as the people in the as the power of the world. So no country fights for you without any. There's no free lunch and this kind of a thing. And nobody, not today's America, not
Now,
Trump's America, in the state that it is in.
Avim Saab,
So I think we need to be
last
realistic about what's possible.
last couple of minutes we have, and I also will put a question to Ahmed. But before that, tell us about the strategy Pakistan needs to have currently, sir. There is a lot of aggression by the Indians on the LOC. You exactly know the way they are targeting our soldiers as well as the civilian population, and killing is taking place on almost daily basis. Plus the proxy war and plus the dirty mindset of the Indians. You know, unfortunately, we do not even have a decent enemy, sir. We are, I don't know whom we are fighting against. I mean, that is such a misery, honestly speaking.
I just found out yesterday that Sindh police can take care of itself. And that's great news. I mean, I can leave Sindh police to do what it must do to the Indians in Karachi or in Sindh. And similarly, the Frontier Corps, Balochistan should be able to take care of whatever happens there. That's never been a problem. And the Indians have never stopped or never ceased their dirty games in Balochistan.
So one thing is for sure that these dirty games, these dirty politics, they will never come to an end. But if you remember, sir, what happened, forget about the 27th of February incident in which we taught them a lesson. We shot 2 of their jets down. But sir, during the Kargil War of 1999, I still remember, I don't know whether people remember it or not, we shot down 2 of their jets even then, and we captured their pilots. The interesting part is that their air force has been exposed, whether they get the F-22 Raptors or F-35 or whatever.
No, they will not.
The machine, it's the
they
man
will not.
behind the
Those
machine.
are not available to them. No,
those are not available. I'm just saying that if they are able to get the best of the best, still they cannot.
They will, for the next 3 years, they will fight with what they have today. The Rafale will take a long time coming up to speed. And Rafale is not something, it's not a new technology in the region. Pakistan already has that kind of technology which Rafale is now going to bring to Indian Air Force. So there is still a long time way from operationalizing that capability. So nothing to worry. Pakistan knows what to do. Pakistan
even this S-400 missile defense system, S-400, that is not something very easy to sort of operate, and you just can't buy them and place them and start operating within minutes and days. It will take time as well. But AVM Sahab, thank you very much. Last question to you, Ahmed Qureshi. And that is about, when we talk about Kashmiris, I mean, 3 words are always very obvious there. One is about the diplomatic support, the political support, and the moral support. Don't you think that this is the time when Pakistan should really gear up? Because the Chinese conflict is taking a very different turn in Ladakh with the Indians. Whereas when it comes to Kashmir, that is, I think, the place where Pakistan should literally morally support so much when it comes to Kashmiri people that instead of 1, there should be 100 Baranwanis now, sir.
Yes, Faisal, very quickly, I just want to add something to the excellent remarks made by AVM Shehzad Chaudhry Saab when you asked him about the American and the Israeli aid to India. And I just would like to add here that we should not limit our options. I, for one, don't see any American or Israeli support to India, frankly. And apart from, of course, the arms deals, and those are really business deals and have a lot to do with the economy, much more than, frankly, strategy and foreign policy. Although everything is interlinked, but it's business, and we can get the same weapons really if we have the money from the Americans and also from the Israelis. So it's really, I don't see any major countries all over the world coming to help India fight with China. There's a lot of posturing, obviously. There's a trade war between China and the US, but we should not limit our options. We should be very clear about the fact that India has its own limitations diplomatically, and we have lots of space to play. And let's not limit ourselves by pre-assuming that the Indians have a very clear-cut American or Israeli or XYZ support. That's number one. Number two, Pakistan has a very strong military capability, and AVM Saab just now mentioned that he just discovered, and we all discovered, frankly, Sindh police can take care of itself, and other provinces can as well. But where we sometimes lag is the media projection, is the public diplomacy, the global public diplomacy, and sometimes, of course, also the diplomacy. There's always room for improvement, and I think we should move on that. There's a lot of space that India has given us, as AVM Saab explained, and Khurram Shahzad also. India has put itself in a corner right now under the Modi government. It is not looked upon in a good way now, the way it used to, for example, 10 years ago, as a model and example for all the developing countries in the world. So we have lots of space. Modi has done a lot of good for us in terms of our diplomacy and our media. We need to even on Kashmir, for example, there's a lot that we can do diplomatically, a lot we can do politically. We need to reach out. We need to engage the Americans even more. We need to have better presence in important capitals, including Washington. And I frankly, I am of the view that Pakistani diplomacy should remove some of the limitations, some of these self-imposed limitations that we have on our diplomacy. We should open up. You talked about alignments. We have superb, amazing, great relationship with China. That must continue. They stood with us. We must stand with them. But we should also be open to a very robust, strong relationship with the US. We should engage them. We have differences. We can work them out. And we should engage and improve the areas where we have overlapping, where we agree, and other powers as well, Russia and others, the EU, Middle Eastern powers. We should open up. And I think Pakistan has the ability.
I think this is the right time to open up, and
yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. But anyway, thank you very much, Ahmed, for your comments on this particular issue. Once again, I would say thank you very much to Air Vice Marshal Shahzad Chaudhry Saab and Khurram Shahzad, who also, in fact, gave a lot of input in our program. And that's all we have for this. I'll see you tomorrow, inshallah. Till then, you take good care of yourself. Khuda Hafiz.